I think people underestimate charging in multifamily units, right? If you live in an apartment complex. I'm gonna speak personally because I was actually one of these individuals. You have to really play around with it. What I mean that is if you don't have charging at home and you live in an apartment complex, you have to go somewhere, right? And you got to spend 30 minutes to an hour, depending on how fast the charge rate is. And you got to do that pretty frequently. The difference between a gasoline vehicle and an electric vehicle is that, especially with a Tesla, if you have Sentry mode, obviously other EVs don't have Sentry mode or something, but if you do, it drains your battery, right? So you will lose some charge overnight. Versus a gas car, you're not losing gas, all right, if you don't drive it. So even if you don't drive the EV very frequently, you still have to go charge it. And that's what gets really kind of annoying. I will say there's some silver linings in this. And once again, just speaking personally, I had an electric vehicle for many years, over a decade now, but 3 or 4 years without having home charging. I would have to go somewhere. I kind of made it a point of enjoyment where it was like, oh, this one's near a bar or a restaurant. You go so frequently that you're like, you know what? You can make friends with the people. It's almost like a family. It's like a Cheers or something like that. But I think that is one thing that people underestimate. So just at least having a plan and being aware that, hey, that's what I'm gonna do. I kind of hang out here. Maybe I can work from there and then it's fine, right? But it's a really bad experience if you didn't know that and then you got an electric vehicle and then you're like, wait a second, I gotta do that? That's why I think it's being truthful and honest to people before they make this transition, because therefore they're not fearful of anything. They're totally aware. It's all part of the plan. So the biggest challenge was to get underwriters, banks, right? People that backed our entire program to think about the future of battery technology and supply chain and recyclability and how it affects the economics of battery supply, replacement, etc. They are so ingrained with thinking retroactively. Where are we right now? And in the early days of any technology, not just electric vehicles, right? There's a few different examples in history where you cannot think retroactively, right? For instance, the very first cell phones. They were thousands and thousands of dollars. They're very archaic. They didn't have a lot of technology. If we said, all right, in 10 years, when we had to replace all these phones, they're still going to be bricks. Well, no, they're not. You really have to think about, well, how is this going to look like in 10 years, a decade from now? And what's the pace of innovation and technology? And these banks, these underwriters, they're so ingrained with mechanical components in internal combustion engines, where you have small little iterations over a decade, not seismic revolutionary changes that happen every single year, right? That was the biggest difference, is working with legacy people and getting them to think, it doesn't matter what the cost of the battery is right now. What's the cost of the battery in 10 years from now? And then having to educate them on how simple these vehicles are, the varying little components there is, but also the element cost, not the supply today, but the supply in 10 years. And what is recyclability going to cost, which is actually a huge factor in economics, because a battery right now could be $15,000, $20,000, but those are all net new batteries. What happens when we take second life batteries and put them back into supply? All of a sudden it's 5, 4, 3, maybe even less. And that is one thing you have to forecast it to them, because they're not going to be able to kind of gauge that on their own. And that was definitely the biggest leap. Well, it's all about execution, right? At the end of the day, an idea is almost worth nothing. The execution of any idea is worth something. You can have the best idea that can revolutionize our planet, but with no execution, it's worth nothing at all. To transition from ideation to creation, you have to break it down to the fundamental components. What can we do? What can't we do? What hasn't been done? So therefore we need to create net new things, and really think about first principles, which is even the physics behind it, right? What's the basic math? What are we actually trying to accomplish? What's the problem? So the idea isn't getting away from us. It's more tangible. It's something that you can then plan and say, all right, in these steps to get here, we can't get here in 1 year, but we'll get here in 10 years. The bigger the idea, the more puzzle pieces that you need to put together and you need to create. And oftentimes you're going to run into situations where you have to pivot. You have to change your mind because you have new information. You realize, the way that I was thinking about this, it actually can't be done this way, but we can do it this way. And then maybe that affects something else. So you have to be willing to have confidence, but not ego, and be willing to change or pivot as new information is being discovered to you, but without losing focus on the end goal. And patience, tenacity, and perseverance are three characteristics that are ultimately required to continue on with where you're trying to go, because sometimes it can take years. It's the customer stories. Most great entrepreneurs are able to create a product or a service or a company that really has an important level of impact, right? And that impact can be quantified. It can be determined of who's gonna have the effects of this impact, what is it supposed to help, who is it supposed to help, so on and so forth. And for us, when we first started all this, the entire purpose was we needed to give value to older EVs, but we needed a reason for people to jump into electric vehicles. And then the secondary was to help people that were already in EVs, to be honest, right? Because if that was your primary, then you're cycling through the same customers. You have to, conquest is more important. If this can be a solution why people buy an electric vehicle, then we've done our jobs properly. And then the secondary is anyone who owns an EV that has our product will have some sort of peace of mind. And that's secondary. So for me, the big aha moment in reality, the experience was hearing stories of, I literally would not have purchased an electric vehicle if it wasn't for this. At the beginning, we didn't know if that was a pipe dream or if that was something that was real. And now we hear it every single day. And now it's kind of norm. But at the beginning, that was, how long is it gonna take until that first person tells us that? And it's kind of nerve-wracking, right? Because the first few owners, they already owned EVs and it wasn't that, right? And probably for the first 6 months, it was people of the ownership community vetting us. And there were small wins in that. Those are great, but that wasn't the prize. That wasn't the prize. The prize was, can this be a reason why more people jump into an electric vehicle? That answer has to be yes. And if it's not, we need to change something. We didn't make the product correctly. I mean, a cliche answer to that is happy customers, right? Doing exactly what we said we were going to do. This is an insurance product. It's not about how you buy it. It's about how you use it. And I'm a firm believer of these products should never be sold. They should be purchased. People should want to buy this because we do what we say we're going to do. And that's hard, right? That's difficult because there's so many people in this business that don't do that. They say one thing and they do another because they care too much about greed. It's all about dollars and cents. For us, it's about people, it's about these cars, and it's about the adoption of which, right? And more, we need to put these people into these cars. The more of these people in these cars that we can put together, the better off we are. And not as just a business, but also as an industry as a whole. So when we hear these stories every single day, it motivates me, at least, to keep on going for tomorrow. And when I hear a negative story, it makes it that much more serious to make sure that we fix our problems, right? We better the experience because it's not about how these things are bought. No one gets excited by buying insurance. That's not a thing. They get excited when they have to use it and when they're in need and it actually works for them. We want to be part of the solution. I spent the last 14 years of my life with one particular mission. I need to get more people aware of this technology. I'm a huge auto enthusiast. I remember the very first time I took a ride in an electric vehicle and it was a Roadster. That changed my life. I mean, quite literally. I said it in the time, people thought I was joking, but here I am 14 years later, still focusing on that exact same mission. There was no way I could see myself building an engine that could ever replicate what I felt in that Roadster in 2010, 2011. Nothing. And there was no science behind it. There was no math that could accomplish that. This was something different. The more I talk to people about it, the more I realize that people don't see this. They don't understand. They never used it before. And still, even today, most people have never even been in an EV before, right? Or driven one. And so For me, the mission is I just need to get more people to know what this is about. And we are not even close. We're not even close. We still have probably 80% of the population to go. But also just making people realize that, hey, these cars are faster, they're fun, they're safer, and they're just easier to use if you have all the right pieces. So then the question is, we need to get the right pieces out to more people, so therefore it's just easy.